Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Winging It F1 podcast. This is the sort of intra-race podcast where we've had a Grand Prix and then we got a week off and then we got another Grand Prix, but we're doing a podcast in between. It's sort of a preview for Brazil, but it's also...
It is the preview for Brazil.
All right. Blimey. Someone got out the wrong side of bed this morning, didn't they?
Well, I did get up on the right-hand side. Normally I get up on the left-hand side, to be fair.
Well, then you actually did get on the wrong side of bed. There we go. A lovely insight into Nigel's life. He's the voice you can hear. We don't need to ask Nigel how he is. He's obviously in a bad mood. But Adam, how are you?
I'm great. I've actually put Nigel in a bad mood by sending a piece to him on time. So that's on me.
Oh,
really.
no, I heard about this. And actually, it was quite annoying.
Success angers Nigel. So that's why I'm to blame for this. But yeah, other than that, I'm good. Got my first assignment of the year submitted today. So I'm on a roll.
Great,
Well
brilliant.
done.
Congratulations on university stuff. That's fun.
Yeah.
Ronnie O'Sullivan said that he's been on a roll for 30 years when he won another title on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't seem to care, which is a bit disappointing.
Because he's too good. That's too good.
I know.
Greatest British sports person ever.
And you'd think if he were the greatest British sport person ever, he would actually try and, enjoy things. But he just seems to be like, I don't care and I don't want anyone else to care. And, part of, being the greatest British sport person ever is not being a nihilist. And he seems to be unable to employ that.
I'd say a key part of being the greatest British sportsman ever is playing a sport as well, which I don't.
It is a sport.
Like he falls,
Snooker's a
falls
sport.
like that.
Be quiet.
So
well, when I win the tic-tac-toe championships and you guys start saying that's not a sport, I'm going to be livid.
More of a sport than snooker.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
To be fair, you don't have to bench press for a cue. But anyway, but also I agree with Nigel. It is a sport. They show it on BBC Sport.
That's what I said.
Yeah, and that's a good.
They show arm wrestling on ESPN. It's kind of
that's quite blatantly a sport. It's arm wrestling.
Yeah, Adam. Not so talkative now, are you?
I've had air guitar on
with your glasses.
Sports channels.
Yeah, but
Premier Sport has shown the air guitar world championships.
That's fair enough. I mean, that's all about precision of where you position your fingers, isn't it, in the air? And how?
I mean, there are a lot of things about precision that aren't sports. That's kind of not the definitive thing. But anyway, we're getting sidetracked.
Do you know what else they show on Premier Sports? NASCAR in the UK.
They also
no one watches it. Everyone watches it on a stream, but I shouldn't say that. Sorry, guys, I outed you all. But anyway,
they also don't show what they say they're showing about 80% of the time. It'll be advertised as Swedish Speedway Second Division, and then it'll just be I don't know, NASCAR or axe throwing or something like that.
Better than Swedish Second Division. I mean,
Speedway's great. That is a sport, actually.
You can watch it live and exclusive on Eurosport.
Oh, yeah, actually, we shouldn't
Speedway.
talk about streaming things because we've got Mr. I work for a TV channel over here. Fair enough. Anyway, let's go and talk about television show sports that Eurosport don't have the rights for. Formula One, because it's the Winging It F1 podcast, not the Winging It podcast. Although the Winging It section has been fulfilled pretty exclusively and equivocally there.
For the last 2.5. Oh, right. Yeah. I've said last 2.5 years, but never mind.
And for the last 2.5 years, to be fair.
2.5
But do you know who hasn't been on the F1 grid for the last 2.5 years? Nico Hulkenberg. And he could be coming back if he's announced by Haas this weekend, because all the roads leads to Hulk. Aston Martin have signed Stoffel Van Dorn as their reserve driver, a role Nico Hulkenberg was in until next year. And why has he been released? I hear you clamor and ask with your loud voices. Probably because he's got a Haas F1 seat for some reason. Great. I'll come to Adam first because Nigel's just going to say something like, why is Nico Hulkenberg getting a seat? Oh, for goodness sake. Why? I hate everyone. So, Adam, why is Nico Hulkenberg getting a seat? And do you love everyone?
Yes, to both. No, I think...
Yes to why?
I think it's partly, being honest, it is partly a lack of options. He was up against Giovinazzi, who, it didn't really deserve to be in the conversation. Ricardo, who's counted himself out of it, and Drugovich, who just doesn't have the kind of momentum around him. So once all of the kind of other pieces came off the board and everything's moved around, then he was kind of the last man standing, I guess. So yeah, he also his record, he's got a very good record across the 2010s decade. He finished in the points in 50% of his races. He scored multiple top 5 finishes in most of his seasons. And yes, he didn't get a podium, but he came close on a fair few occasions. And since leaving the sport, I think he's only enhanced his reputation, to be honest, because whenever he's had to come and stand in, then he's done a fantastic job. He outperformed Lance Stroll on his second day in a 2022 spec car. He qualified third at Silverstone in 2020, having had a weekend to actually get to grips with the car. So every time he's been called upon since he has left, then he's done the job that needed doing. He's a consistent driver, proven driver, and I think he can help get the best out of Haas. And with Kevin Magnussen, I think that's a solid lineup in the midfield.
Completely disagree. Mick Schumacher should keep his seat. He's much improved over the second half of the season. Some of Adam's points in, he's got top 10 finishes. Well, that's his job. He's got a car that's good enough to finish in the points. And yeah, he did it. But he didn't exactly set the world alight. And if you think about drivers who've returned in F1, apart from Fernando Alonso, who's probably one of the greatest talents this century, no driver has returned and got anywhere near to their peak. Look at Raikkonen, look at Schumacher, Michael Schumacher.
Kimi was great at Lotus.
What, did you think he was as good as he was at McLaren 2005 or Ferrari 2007? No chance.
Kimi was great at Lotus.
He was nowhere near his peak, and Raikkonen.
But Adam does make a good point, though. He was very good. Even if you're not at your peak, you can still be a very good driver.
But the point is, Raikkonen and Schumacher, with all due respect to Hulkenberg, are much better than Hulkenberg. So if you take off a bit off Hulkenberg, he's going to be top bottom half driver, and that's not good enough for Haas.
But why are you taking a bit off Hulkenberg? Because he has had a bit of time on the sideline.
3 years out of sport.
But
that's a long time.
I think that's the point that Adam tried to make with his immediate point, was that even with that time out, he performed very well. You look at his Saudi Arabia drive this year; it was actually very, very accomplished. And if you look at where the Aston Martin was at races following that, in the first half of the year, it wasn't a good car. So
I disagree.
2 years out of the sport, and he came back in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and performed excellently.
Right, but why won't you take an informed Mick Schumacher?
Yeah, no, I think that is a very good point.
Why not?
But I don't think
what's Schumacher done wrong to not keep a seat?
Well, one sec. But this is the thing.
Crashed a lot.
He hasn't crashed a lot recently.
When was the last time he crashed? Right, there we go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just got a good point there.
May.
Yeah. What, he's had 3 heavy crashes this year.
He's had more good performances than bad, and it is a good point. Like if I mean, the Nico Hulkenberg conversation does need to be had because he looks like he's the favorite, but the conversation should really only be had if Mick Schumacher isn't an option. And realistically, Mick Schumacher is being written off unfairly, and I think I agree with you on that, Nigel. But I also think you're writing off Nico Hulkenberg unfairly anyway, just out of the conversation. In my opinion.
He's a very good driver, of course, but if I'm choosing between Schumacher and Hulkenberg, which is what it is, because Gunter Steiner said it's a 50-50 decision now, you got to choose Schumacher. He's a lot younger. He's going to only get better. And compared to a Hulkenberg who's aging, quite frankly, and we've seen with returning drivers in F1 throughout the sport's history, over 71, 72 years, it generally doesn't go well unless you are one of the absolute greats.
We have seen drivers start late and do well. I mean, granted, it's more rare, but like Damon Hill, how old was he when he won his championship with Williams? Probably the same age Nico Hulkenberg is now. And he was getting better throughout that period. So could you say realistically then, I mean, Damon Hill isn't exactly the world's highest rated champion. And would you say you could make a case then for drivers that even traditionally can get better in their late 30s?
I don't think he'll be. I don't see Hulkenberg being better than he was.
Yeah, maybe better's the wrong way of putting it. But why does he have? Why is I do genuinely think Nico Hulkenberg's not quite best, is still pretty much F1 level. So,
But is it better than Schumacher, would you say?
well, we don't know. I mean, it's the kind of thing that you can't really gauge on that front. But I think it's probably a lot more polished and a lot more refined. And for a team like Haas, who very obviously wants polished, refined, and reliable, and I think they did lose a little bit of faith with Mick Schumacher in that regard. And you can at least rely on Nico Hulkenberg to provide that.
I just think if you're going to bring a returning driver back, it's got to be a great super driver like
Mhm.
an Alonso, not someone who's in the midfield at Hulkenberg or like Perez, Bottas level, because that's what Hulkenberg probably was. He was at that kind of level.
Mhm.
I just don't think bringing that kind of drivers back. And also, we all agreed that Yuki Tsunoda deserved a third season. We all had
Yeah.
no complaints about that. So why can't Mick Schumacher get a third season? What's
Yeah,
the
we don't
difference?
disagree with that. I
I
don't.
think I think the main difference is the kind of drivers that were available to replace him. AlphaTauri were never going to bring in a Nico Hulkenberg. The young drivers they had, I mean, they brought in Gasly. So whereas
The reason
Haas had that
AlphaTauri are
pick,
bringing in Nick de Vries is because they're keeping Tsunoda, and Haas already have Magnussen nailed down to a contract, so they can afford to look around and have that kind of instability of a different driver. So that's kind of that question only anyway. The reason, I mean, you look at the timeline of announcements for AlphaTauri, they tried to nail down Gasly very early, but they were not very interested in nailing down Tsunoda until they were very clear that they were definitely having to get a new driver for next year. So if you look at it from that perspective, from an F1 team, even like we can say about Tsunoda, but they're not necessarily as convinced as they probably should be signing him down. So I mean, if you think about it from Haas, a team who can't afford to take a risk in a way that AlphaTauri can, you could then extrapolate from that perspective that
But
not necessarily much. It's a difficult one because a risk could be
surely a risk is bringing
keeping
Hulkenberg back.
exactly.
So,
It's a risk to either bring Hulkenberg back, but and I think they're seeing it as the same risk to keep Mick Schumacher. So I think there's just a general belief that someone who's a bit more proven, even if the risk level is pretty similar, is where they're leaning. Does that make sense?
yeah, it makes sense. For me, I always believe in the younger drivers, especially if they've earned their chance, which Schumacher more than has over the last 10 races or so. He's
Yeah.
matched or arguably been better than Magnussen. For him to lose his seat for that, I don't agree with that at all.
I
Yeah.
think with a full kind of pre-season and preparation for next season, I think Hulkenberg will be great. I think when he comes back in, he will kind of surprise a lot of people and prove a lot of people. You know, I think there's high expectations for him, but I think when he has that preparation behind him, I think he will be even better than he's shown in the last 3 years.
And I also kind of think you have to kind of commend him for getting himself back in the conversation for this seat. Like, I mean, hats off to that. I do agree with you, Nigel. I feel like I have to placate you at the moment. I do agree that probably Mick should stay in that seat. Don't worry, don't go off on one. But just to commend Nico, I do genuinely. To be honest, I think they both will perform pretty much the same. Whoever they go for out of Hulkenberg and Schumacher, I think it will be pretty similar performance levels based on where Mick is now. If you asked me a few months ago, I probably would have thought Hulkenberg would have done better, but Mick has shown a very good level of progression through this season.
He'll only get better.
He might not, and that's the kind of thing. He might not get better. We don't know that.
I think going off his junior careers, we know that he likely will, because he once he gets used to the car, to the team, he generally improves quite a bit. So going off that, well, you could be right.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a different car in F1. You're more likely to have a different car every year than you are when you go from F3 Europe up to the same spec F3 Europe car, and F2 from the same spec F2 car, in the same Prema team. It's an easier car to then get used to over a 2-year period. Whereas, yeah, there will be foibles that are similar between the 22 Haas and the 23 Haas, but it is fundamentally a new car. So it is a harder thing to gauge in that front with Schumacher in Formula One. That's one of the things I'm wary of him about, because it was everyone's wariness when he started in Formula One, and the new regs did step him back a year on that as well. And while he has improved throughout the season, you know, you could say that you don't want to have that step back at the start of every year. And if that's the pattern, then you could say it could be good for improving, but it's also a bit worrying for a pattern.
Yeah, But at the moment, it's only a pattern of 1
Yeah, in
Well,
Formula
that's-
One,
in F1. Yeah.
but in
Mm.
F2 and F3, it's a pattern of 3.
Yeah.
So
That's not F1.
no, it's not. It's an easier thing to keep going with.
Yeah.
What is my point? Because you're in the same spec car rather than a different spec. So
Mm.
it's less of a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I can't argue
So
that.
that is a misgiving. Which, to be fair, as a driver matures, he's more likely to overcome that. But not when he's matures to the age of Nico Hulkenberg.
I don't think this is the last we'll see of Schumacher in F1. If he does lose the seat, then I don't think it's the last we'll see of Schumacher in F1.
No,
I agree. Yeah. If he loses,
I agree with that.
I agree. Yeah. We can all agree on that.
Yeah. Although I don't really know what he does if he doesn't, at least for immediate plans for next year, if he doesn't end up.
Well, if Nico Hulkenberg can come back after 2 years or 3 years, then sorry, it is 2 years, isn't it? Then Mick Schumacher can as well. I think.
It's 3 years.
3 years. I'm losing.
Is
my mind.
Ferrari coming back into the work?
Yeah, they are.
Like-
They've got a hypercar program, but they've also dropped Mick Schumacher as a Ferrari driver.
Yeah,
So unless they hold out an olive branch and give him a hypercar seat with Giovinazzi and co, then maybe. But they have a whole load of GTE drivers they are very, very openly wanting to promote to those seats, like Collado and the like. So it's not you can't just assume if you're that you'll get a good WEC seat, particularly at the front.
I can
So-
see it if he is kind of out of that.
I can see him having the sidelines year completely next year, which would be
Hmm.
difficult for him.
I think if he does kind of get out of the F1 conversation completely, I can see that being kind of a longer term thing for him though, and kind of having success with Ferrari in that way than in F1, but still,
I'd hope so. I'd hope so.
Well, hopefully he's back in. Hopefully he does get another chance, but we shall see.
Yeah, I think the heart and the head for me say Mick Schumacher.
Same here.
I think for what
I don't really have a heart, but my head does. So,
for what Haas are looking for, then I think Hulkenberg fits the bill.
I think you also got to think the way Haas have, let's say, treated or gone about it with Schumacher with the comments. I don't know if they're trying to test out his character or personality by criticising him stronger than like the average team does to their driver. But I would really like to see Schumacher in a different team because to me the Haas team is not stable, let's say, or the best environment for a new driver, especially. And that is another reason why I think Schumacher coming back the way he has with his form, with that kind of environment, that makes it even more impressive for me.
I think there's a particular misgiving from Haas's side, which is the sort of not necessarily asked for by Mick, but the sort of Mick people in F1, if that makes sense. You've got a lot of, particularly from the German side, are very sort of pro Mick and very anti Haas and are very openly about that. And Haas have used Schumacher to get some German sponsorship and things like that, and are very, very unhappy with this characterization because it's messing up sponsorship deals with them and so on. So there's a lot of baggage from Haas's side with Schumacher, and they feel like Hulkenberg will dispense with that because he's just hugely popular anyway, across the board. And as much as you can rely on the Schumacher name, that actually has brought more bad than good to Haas. And also, I disagree with them testing him. I think there's an element of sometimes you get to a level of exasperation that everything you've tried internally has been exhausted. You have to try something external. But I also think there is an element of style, and it does go a little bit far when he gets to the external stage. So I think it's an element of both, but I don't think it's a calculated experiment to the driver. Because I think if it is, Haas Steiner shouldn't be doing that because he saw what he did to Grosjean with that, because that just didn't get Grosjean to score points when he was very critical of him. So it's not the right course of action. So anyway, I think we can draw a line under the Haas seat. People keep saying there'll be news at points. There might not be. Who knows? I think we should move on to another F1 silly season box, which hasn't been ticked, but has been ticked, in that Logan Sargeant has been announced as the intention for Williams for 2023, depending on his super license points that from Formula 2. So if he finishes above 5th, is it, in Formula 2, he'll be have enough super license points if you add it to his F3.
It depends on his practice sessions, because like in Mexico, he was 3 kilometers short of getting an extra point because he needs to do 100 kilometers without doing anything stupid or getting a penalty. And he did 97, so he didn't get a point there. And then he's obviously doing Abu Dhabi as well, so it depends if he gets a point there. But it's either 5th or 6th, I think.
Okay. And he's 4th.
Not that far, yeah. He's
yeah.
I think it's 3rd. Is it
Third. Yes, you're right. He's 3rd, but it is a very close knit gaggle from 3rd to about 7th or 8th in the F2 standings. Everyone forgets about F2 for a few months of this kind of.
Well, that's what happens when you make a stupid camp. Sorry.
Yes, it is. You're right. They should have done what they used to do, which is have a round supporting WEC or a round supporting DTM finales and stuff like that, like they used to have in sort of 2017. But anyway, that aside, Logan Sargeant, happy, impressed, de-impressed. Oh, yay! Nigel's not de-impressed.
I'm never de-impressed.
Yes, you are. You were de-impressed at the start of this podcast.
No, I think he is a great talent. I think in F3 in 2020, he was quicker than Porsche. Not Porsche, sorry. So Porsche's right. He was quicker than Piastri.
He's in your head.
Sorry, Piastri. He won the championship, of course. Piastri in his rookie season. Sargeant was in the 2nd season, yes, but he was better on raw pace than Piastri. And if look at how everyone talks about Piastri, some people think he's a future world champion. He could be amazing, could be all that. So depending on what you think of Piastri, I think Sargeant could be just as good as him, because also his season with Toulouse. I mean, Toulouse, that's one of the worst, like, with all due respect, of course, but compared to the likes of Prema, Carlin, it's one of the worst.
They don't deserve to be in the same breath in F3 as Prema and Carlin. And I can say that with all due respect, and it still be a relatively kind thing to say.
It's one of the worst teams, yet he still finished 7th in the championship. So
I think
all of that, plus a pretty good F2 season. I don't think he's set the world alight at all, but his F3 alone.
He hasn't dampened the flames.
No, yeah, you're right. But yeah, I think everything I've said, he definitely deserves to be on the grid, and he could be just as good as Piastri, I think.
I think I agree. I don't know why. I just kind of thought that someone else would come in and get the seat, but I do agree that it is the best option they can go for. It's promoting a driver from within. He's shown that he's got the speed, and I think he has shown through his junior career, not just this year, that he can make that step up. I think it's just a bit of a concern about the super license points. I mean, he's 12 points ahead of 7th. He's only 25 points ahead of 10th. So there could be a lot of change in the Formula 2 rankings with one race to go. So I think it's just that is the concern. I think it is the right time for him to, or, I think he could have stayed, but I don't think he will, he's unready for F1 as is. And, having a young driver at Williams, we saw the last young driver at Williams do pretty well. Having an American on the grid will be fun. But I think
he hasn't done that well.
Yeah, good point. Forgot about him, but he's forgettable.
Yeah, we know Chris Russell has done very well.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the last.
Sergei Sirotkin, Lance Stroll still on the grid.
The last young driver with E in their surname at Williams did very well. So yeah, I think it's a great move. It just feels like a feel-good move, providing he actually gets there. That's the only concern.
Yeah, I think it is, providing he gets there. I've said before on this podcast, even before Sargeant was in the picture for Formula One this year, I've said before that how much I rate him. I've similar to Nigel, have backed him since 2020, and I'm really happy to see this, this kind of solid progression and solid chance and faith from Williams, and it's sort of testament to the way they treat their drivers in a way. And I think he will do. I think he has potential to do pretty well. It's a really hard one to call because he obviously doesn't have that much F1 seat time, but they're giving him as much time as they can. Obviously, he's not in the car in Brazil with it being a sprint weekend, but They are trying to give him as much time as they can, and you know, I'm intrigued to see how it goes. I think it's nice to have just a couple of rookies on the grid. We've got Piastri and Sargeant, and if you look back to, like you say, 2020, the two title contenders for the 2020 F3 Championship are going to be making their rookie season in F1 at the same time, and I just find that cool.
I've got a question.
Go.
By kind of not announcing it, but stating he will be in the car, he'll be in F1 next year. Does that put a bit too much pressure on him for the Abu Dhabi?
It puts a lot of pressure on him, but it would be internal anyway. Sometimes it's nice to have.
Maybe not said. Like,
I know, but it is nice to have the intention put out for you rather than have it always being like a thing like, oh, they nearly gave me the seat. Perhaps you could say it like that. For a future sort of prospect. I mean, if it's internal, I think you could argue that there's less of a show of faith, and you could give confidence. But it also, I think you're right. It also just sort of throw the eyes onto him.
Yeah, I was kind of going to, I guess, echo that. It kind of avoids any, that line of questioning going into the final weekend. So yes, it puts more pressure on the fact that he's got to get the result, but there's not kind of all these rumours buzzing around that, will he get it? Have Williams promised it? It's still kind of being, maybe an open secret, but still kind of officially secret. So I think it avoids that, and he'll have to deal with pressure if he's as good as we think he is, and he can be competing for race wins. Then he'll need to deal with pressure and being able to do that. So I think it's a good test for Williams. It shows kind of his mettle in the biggest stage that you can have before F1.
I agree, and if he does do well, so if he wins the feature race or and has a great sprint race, to do that under that pressure, that is serious character and personality there. So
there is an element. I don't know. I mean, what you guys would think about this? Does it put a target on his back? Does it put a target on his back in the F2 field? Do they think, oh, I'm going to put a pop on him, more likely to make a move on him, more likely to crash into him then?
I think
might
do,
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Imagine if he has an incident now. That would just be so... I mean, it goes back to the super license thing, which we talked about in September, which you should go and watch because we all isolated it. But it's just, he shouldn't...
I think crucially, he's made mistakes in this F2 season that you can blame him for. So realistically, if you're leaving it to the luck of the draw in the final round, you can always say, oh no, this person crashed into me and it wasn't my fault and they're the reason I don't have an F1 drive. Well, if you don't have the position in the first place, then you've got to allow for these kind of things. So I think
you say about Abu
wreck
Dhabi
his mind.
F1, can't you, as well?
Yes.
I mean, also, is it 3 years that you can have, 3 or 4 years eligibility?
I think it's 3 because I think it changed to 3 with COVID. I think it was 2 prior to that. Or maybe they only added 1 extra season for 2021 or whatever.
It might be 3 out of 4. But I mean, the point is,
it's normally 3, but then they added 1 to 4. I don't think it's 2 because imagine the position you have to get over 2 years.
Yeah.
So if it is 4 years, if it is 4 years, then he'll still have his 2020 F3 third place and wherever he finishes this season. So even if he doesn't make it, then there's still, it's not kind of the end of the road for him. It will put pressure on next season having to come back and get another top 6-ish position, but it's not kind of, it will torpedo his career. It will set him back.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. It's really, for both of these topics we've discussed, is put a pin in it and watch this space. But one thing that isn't watch this space, because we know when it will happen, I guess, is the Brazilian Grand Prix, the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, the second ever Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Sorry?
What if there's riots because of the presidency thing and it gets cancelled?
Then it will be cancelled. But the scheduled Brazilian Sao Paulo Grand Prix, depending on your opinions of Lula or Bolsonaro, which we won't go into the details of now, but I will say that I'm happy it's Lula and not Bolsonaro. But 49.2% of Brazil won't be happy.
Nigel's staying very quiet on the subject.
Genuinely, though,
you've not said anything.
the statistics are 50
Lulu.
49. It's scarily like Brexit. But anyway, enough Brazilian politics. Let's move on to Brazilian Formula One politics. And just for a bit of fun, what's your favorite Brazilian Grand Prix moment? Even though this is the Sao Paulo Grand Prix and there has only been one Sao Paulo Grand Prix, we're going to be nice and include the Brazilian Grand Prix in this preview moment
nice.
because it's at the same circuit. Nigel, hit me with your favorite Brazilian Grand Prix moment.
We're all going to say the same thing. It's got to be the 2008. Is it Glock? Yes, it has to be. It has to be.
Was it Glock?
I think it
Yes.
was.
It was
Oh.
Tim O'Clock, technically, but he shifted the apostrophe.
has-
He got rid of the apostrophe, sorry.
That has to be the greatest moment in F1.
It's got to be one of the
Formula
most
F1.
thrilling, most exciting moments in Formula One.
Yeah.
It's
Top
kind of the
five.
ultimate. If you're like a Hollywood producer scripting a race movie, that is like the absolute kind of Hollywood ending that you would put in. So,
Well,
and
it
this
did
is
win a
what I love
BAFTA.
about this is what
Actually
I
won a
really,
BAFTA.
I'd forgotten that, but there we go. Like that's what I really, really love about sport, maybe more than anything else, is that you can get these moments that if you put them in a book or a movie or a TV show, then everyone go, oh, that's too cliche, that's too perfect, whatever. But these things can happen, and to have, all of the narratives and storylines going into it, and then just the actual race itself, and have it decided on the last corner of the last lap of the last race of the season is just, it's incredible, unbelievable. But it was believable because it was Glock and it did happen. So yeah.
What made it so much more unbelievable was the fact that Felipe Massa was legitimately world champion and had done a fantastic drive. And it's still a very sad, but also a fantastic lap of Formula One.
So I was a big Ferrari fan back then, and I
was
there were tears coming out my eyes when Hamilton won. I would have to say I was pretty upset back when I was 7 or 8. Well, it would have been October.
So it was 2008.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think of the month because
it would have been the end of October.
Yeah, so I would.
Was that the last time you showed an emotion? There's an anger.
No. I have to think. What did I
Second
think?
last.
He showed exasperation. Come on. I mean, but this is the thing with Brazil. Like, we can look at that and point to it as sort of the prized moment. But I mean, then you look at Jenson Button coming from 14th to 5th the next year to win, and you look at the 2012 Grand Prix, and you look at
2003.
2003 was an insane, ridiculous race that's scary to watch on replays.
Yeah.
You think about everything that's happened to Rubens Barrichello. You think about 2021 there. You think, and the racing there and the non-illegal racing there, that was the definition of hard racing. That's genuinely, I was considering saying the 2021 Brazilian Grand Prix for this, but it was just, it's one of those races that really rankles with me because it's such a phenomenal drive, but then it's kind of like the fact that Verstappen was doing so well to stay in the lead and then just drove to bloody Rio was insane, and I just don't like that. But anyway,
I mean, even the time before that, 2019, where you had the Ferraris finally boiling over and crashing, Albon and Verstappen overtaking Hamilton and Bottas at the same time in the center S's.
Albon overtook Vettel.
What?
Bottas retired that caused the whole thing.
Okay, well, it was nearly right. And then, that was a fantastic
the Gasly podium is the bit that stands out to me.
Science podium too for McLaren. It's just the whole. It's just an amphitheater of sport. It's
not
it's the run up the hill, the bank corner, all of the fans just on the top of the hill. The fact that you can kind of fit it all into one shot, just draped over the side of this hill in Sao Paulo, and it is just absolutely fantastic. It's an occasion just to watch it. I think
it's very rare. I was just gonna say, it's very rare where F1 Grand Prix over the last 20 years there's been more genuinely great races than average races, and Brazil is one of those events. I can't think of many other. Maybe the British Grand Prix as well, but there's not many like that. It's so good. It's one of the highlights of the year.
It is one of the highlights. That is absolutely true. Will it be a highlight this year?
Yeah. So it just delivers.
Well,
I think
They should call it the Interlagos Postman.
I was thinking a few weeks ago. I was talking to Adam, and I said Hamilton would win. If he was going to win a race, it would be this weekend, Brazil. I don't know why. I've just got a feeling.
Yeah, you said that for every race since the summer break.
I've not.
Done it for every race except Spa for the summer break. No,
I didn't say it for the last two. I thought.
Yeah, that's because you were
It's
saving it up for
closer.
Interlagos.
Yeah, I was saving
That's
it up because it is
tactical.
going to happen. It's going to happen for Brazil.
All right, you Ferrari fan. Right. Okay. So Nigel thinks Mercedes. Hamilton. Do you think Mercedes?
Hamilton. Do I think what?
Yeah,
Adam.
fine. Hamilton.
Um,
Adam. I mean, I think I said Nigel.
Yeah,
then,
yeah.
didn't I?
You called Adam Hamilton, I think.
Did I?
think.
Oh.
Yeah, you said
yeah,
Hamilton.
you did.
Oh, okay. Well,
So-
you're never getting a better compliment than that, mate. You may as well retire now.
Wow.
All right. Well, Adam, then
You
clearly
you have raced me in
Adam's
karting
going
to
to
be
win.
fair. No, I don't think it will be Mercedes.
running
I
out of
think it will
time.
be an exciting race. Maybe Perez. I'll go Perez. A bit rogue, but non-rogue.
I think Verstappen's going to win, but because someone's got to be boring, and the fact that he's taken the win record for a season this year means that realistically, we probably should say Verstappen's going to win.
What's going
But-
to rain?
I think
So it'll be Hamilton.
It could rain.
Verstappen
Actually, it looks like
does-
it's going to be rained off.
if Verstappen does win, it will be exciting. Like it will be, a kind of fight from the back, or it will, in some way, Brazil will deliver, or they'll be like Vettel will take second.
No, but it won't now, will it?
It might not.
It will. Like
Might
I have,
not.
I have so much faith in Interlagos and
But
Sao
look at the
Paulo
2019
Grand Prix
race.
to
It was
deliver.
boring until like 5 laps from the end. It was a dreadful race until the
And
end.
then it had it became really memorable in
Yeah.
5 laps.
Well, but 2018 was actually interesting.
Yeah,
but
Ocon and Verstappen.
Ocon and Verstappen. 2017, what happened then? Vettel won from the flag, didn't he?
Yeah, maybe not too much. 2016 was rainy.
2016 was rainy.
Oh.
2015, Rosberg just
Rosberg won.
walked it. 2014, Rosberg walked it and Hamilton spun. 2013,
Yeah.
Vettel walked
That was a
it.
good race, though. 2014.
Yeah, it was interesting until
Pit
Hamilton
stop
spun.
phase.
Hmm.
Yeah.
See, this is what I mean. Like, I have faith that it will be a
There'll
good
be
race.
interesting points just because of the nature, and it's a sprint weekend. And to be honest, they just end up with weird stuff happening anyway. Like who? I mean, even if you don't enjoy the sprint, it does normally, for some reason, have the sprints have added weird storylines to Formula One. So there's a chance we will have more weird storylines.
Has Verstappen still won every sprint?
No.
No, not at all. He didn't win Brazil, and he didn't win Monza last year.
Yeah, he only won
No,
one
he
last
won.
year. He's
Yeah.
won 2 this year. There's only been 2 this year.
Oh, dear.
And
He's had a
he only
shocker.
did it on the final lap in Imola, and that was a cracking race. That sprint in Imola, actually.
I'll use this time to promote a video / well, you can listen to it as well. On Wednesday, there'll be an upload of an argument me and Adam had for like 25 minutes about sprints after the Austria race. So if you want to hear a massive heated, well, not heated, it was a bit heated, debate about sprints, listen to it on Wednesday.
There we go. Depending on your opinion, you'll hear things, and most likely
You'll agree with me.
that's never happened ever. But anyway, who knows? Who knows what happened? Qualifying on a Friday night, that's weird. And have fun.
Fun. What is
Yeah.
it?
Enjoy. Oh yeah, Adam said, okay, bye.
Okay, right, we're wrapping up. Brilliant.
Say bye, Nigel.
No,
You never say bye.
correct.
Why not? Maybe this is
I don't
why people
know.
think you're really standoffish and want you kicked off the podcast.
It's just a trend, isn't it? So I've got to continue it.
Why be
Because people
trendy
like
when
trends these days.
why be a trend when you can be a classic?
A classic.
Yeah.
Cla-
In a world of trends, why not try and be a classic and say goodbye?
Oh right, I see what you mean.
What does Chris Froome ride?
A bike.
He
There
said
we
it. We
go.
can cut it. Ha!
What?
Bye.